Okay, class. Now we finished reading Enemy's Prime. Remember the details from this book because we're going to use those details for our activity after this lesson. So our lesson is going to be explaining the difference between two different types of details: explicit details and implied details. Explicit details is something that is told to you directly within the text. The implied details is something that's not directly said to you, but you can figure it out by using what you already know. So, an example would be, Anthony likes the color orange, or Beth is allergic to cats. Both of these sentences give us explicit details saying what we already need to know. Now, implied detail would be, Jenna touched the hot stove and yelled ouch. We can assume that when Jenna touched that hot stove, that she burned her hand. Or we can say that Caleb smiled when the teacher gave him his grade. Now, since the teacher gave him his grade and he smiled, we can assume that he made a good grade. So for implied details, we're using our explicit details. We're using what is given to us to make an assumption making that an implied detail. So an easy way to remember explicit details is thinking about the word explain. Both words start with EX, and whenever you're given explicit detail, you're given an explanation, or the detail is explaining what you need to know. With implied detail, you can think about the word hint, because it's not necessarily giving you what you want to know, but you can use those explicit details to figure out what you need to know from the text. So explicit details, questions or evidence can be found within the text, and implied is the opposite. Those details the evidence that you need or questions cannot be found within the text, and you have to use those explicit details to figure out the implied details. So they go hand in hand. So I'm gonna set this right here so we can use this for our activity. So we're gonna be using details that I found within the Enemy Pie book and figuring out if it's explicit or implied. I'm gonna set this right here. So our first detail is the father never planned to hurt Jeremy. He just wanted the boys to become friends. Is this explicit or implied? Did he specifically say this within the text, or are we just assuming from our explicit details? So this is an implied detail because he never said it within the text, but we can assume based off of the actions within the book that he never wanted to harm Jeremy. So enemy pie is the fastest way to get rid of enemies. And then this is in quotation marks, so we know that this is something that someone said within the text. This is something that the dad said within the text, making this an explicit detail. So next we have, the pie actually smelled good and tasted good. It was not a bad idea. Now, he did say that the pie did smell good, and in the end we found out that it tasted good. But did he specifically say that it's not a bad pie? No, because in the beginning he was under the impression that it was going to be a nasty pie for the enemy, but ended up being good. So we can take our explicit details to figure this out, making this an implied detail. Now this one was a very tricky one, so if it got you, I'm so sorry. Next we have, Dad offered to make the pie and refused all the gross ingredients offered. We saw within the text that the son did offer him a bunch of nasty ingredients like worms or his old gum, but the dad didn't want any of them for the pie. So since this was stated specifically in the text, it's going to go under what? Explicit. Good job. Next we have, the boy realizes that he enjoys Jeremy's company and that he just needs to get to know him. Is this explicit or implied? It's implied because he never said it, but we can make an inference and figure it out just by our explicit details. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. Explicit or implied? Explicit, because he did say this in the beginning of the book, that he was his one and only enemy. As he played with Jeremy throughout the day, he realized that the two have a lot in common. Explicit or implied? This is implied because he never said it, but we can figure it out by reading it, our explicit details, that he figured out that they had a lot in common. Now our final one is, Dad said in order for the pie to work that he had to spend the day with Jeremy. This is explicit. Good job. Because he did say in order for the pie to work that he had to spend the day with Jeremy. All right, good job everyone. Now that you understand what explicit and implied details are, you can use what you learned today and find these type of details within your own books from the library. Good job everyone.